So we showed how the people who decided to make the Constitution were worried about having too much power with any one government or government agency. So they came up with the systems of checks and balances. And let's take a look now at the different types of checks that different branches have over the others. We're going to start by taking a look at the checks that the president has over the other branches. Remember that the president is in charge of the executive branch, and that the main job of the executive branch is to carry out and enforce laws. So here's an example of what that could look like. The executive branch may hire people to inspect food after Congress makes a law that says food should be inspected to make sure it is safe to eat. We've already learned that Congress is in charge of making laws and that the executive branch is in charge of executing the laws or making sure that they are followed. The executive branch hiring people to enforce laws is one of the ways that they can check the Congress. Here's another example. The Constitution gives the president a very special power for a check against Congress. Say there's a proposed law that is presented to be turned into a law that everybody has to follow. Congress would call this law a bill. Now, Congress creates this bill, they vote on it, and if the Congress has a majority vote, then that bill could become law. But let's say that the president does not like the bill that would be turned into a law. They do not think it is a good bill that would be turned into a law. Then the Constitution gives the president the power to reject or cancel the bill so that it won't go into effect. This is a very special power. It's called a veto. The president's right to veto a bill passed by Congress is an example of how the executive branch checks and balances over the legislative branch. Let's look at how the president gets to check the judicial branch. The executive branch has the power to appoint all federal judges, including the Supreme Court justices. So even though it is up to the judicial branch to decide if a law is fair, the executive branch, led by the president, is able to choose who those judges are going to be. That's an important check over the judicial branch. Summary of president checks. We're going to use this diagram as we continue to talk about checks and balances of the different branches. Right now we're looking at the ones with the blue arrows. The president can veto bills passed by the Congress, and the president is in charge of appointing judges for the Supreme Court. Here's one last example of a presidential check over the legislative branch. After Congress passes a law, it is up to the president and the other people who work for the president in the executive branch to carry out the law. If the law is something the president really agrees with, the president might work very hard to carry it out. If the president does not agree with the law, the Constitution gives the president the right not to work very hard at carrying out that law. This is a very important example of a presidential check over the legislative branch. And we're going to learn about a specific president, one that's very famous, named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who decided to use this power of checks over the legislative branch. And we'll see which law he didn't really agree with and how he used his check to make sure that it was not as powerful as the legislative branch had hoped.